The clang of metal echoed softly beneath the roof of the Langford Armory. She was just another civilian contractor, crouched low behind the weapons bench, sleeves rolled, eyes down. Sweat clung to her shoulders as she worked in silence, tightening a worn scope with the kind of care reserved for memories, not machines. No one knew her name, most didn't care. Until the moment her jacket slipped from her left shoulder. Until the black ink surfaced bold, unmistakable. A dragon coiled around a broken shield. The insignia of Iron Hawk Unit 12. A unit officially declared lost. All hands. Silence swept the armory, then boots. General Marcus Marsh stepped into view. His eyes locked on her ink, and he staggered, mid-stride. The clipboard in his hand clattered to the concrete. And the only man who had once commanded the Iron Hawks collapsed not from injury, but from the impossible memory standing before him. This isn't just a story about a tattoo. It's about ghosts that don't haunt, they return to rebuild. Watch to the very end to understand who she is and why the silence around her speaks louder than metals. Comment where in the world you're watching from and what time it is in your time zone right now. Then hit subscribe, because stories like this, they don't come often. But when they do, they stay with you. The Langford Armory wasn't much to look at, just a corrugated metal structure with sun-bleached doors and the constant scent of CLP and carbon residue drifting through the rafters. Inside, weapons lay stripped across stainless steel benches. Soldiers rotated through like clockwork, each on a timed schedule, dropping rifles for maintenance, checking sights, logging reports. Efficiency, order, readiness. No one paid much attention to the woman in Base 6. She was always there before reveille, the first to unlock the racks, the last to leave when the dust settled. She moved with the rhythm of someone who didn't need to be watched because no one ever did. Her name, printed on a faded patch, read Vayne. To most of the enlisted men, she was just the armory tech civilian. Quiet, forgettable. But there was something about her stillness that made people look away too quickly. She didn't make conversation. She didn't glance up when the younger soldiers made comments under their breath, or when Sergeant Nolan Beck, the loudest voice in the room, lobbed a half-hearted joke in her direction. "Hey, Miss Fix, it," Beck called one morning, swaggering past her bench with an M27 slung loose in one hand. "You polish 'em like that for everyone, or just the ones who call you sweetheart?" His buddies chuckled. She didn't look up, just kept brushing solvent along the bolt carrier group, even strokes, no hesitation. Beck waited for a reaction. None came. So he rolled his shoulders and muttered, "Must have gotten that job through a vet hire charity. Either that or she's someone's ex." More laughter. Not cruel, just careless, the kind born of boredom and bravado. Sarah Vayne remained silent. But it wasn't the silence of discomfort. It was the silence of control, tight, composed, and practiced like a drill. The kind of quiet that made certain men uneasy without knowing why. She never used manuals, never checked torque charts. Her hands moved like memory, like they'd done this exact assembly in sand, in sweat, and in darkness. And though no one said it aloud, even Beck's crew started noticing strange things. A rifle that jammed on the range would leave her bench firing cleaner than factory issue. A misaligned optic fixed without calibration tools. A trigger reset so perfectly tuned it felt custom built. Once, Corporal Jenkins brought in an SR-25 that no one could fix. 2 different armorers had sent it back, unrepairable. Vayne said nothing, just took it apart in 12 minutes and handed it back functioning like new. When asked how, she only said, "The springs were backward. You were shearing pressure across the carrier." No arrogance, no performance, just fact. And still, they didn't see her. Not really. Not until the day the heat crept high enough to make her shrug the jacket off her shoulder. The faded green tank top clung tight to her skin, and a glimpse of something ink-deep began to show. Most thought it was just a tattoo, personal, maybe symbolic. Until Private Sandoval caught a clearer look. He stopped mid-clean, his brow furrowed. "Hey, Beck?" he whispered, nudging his sergeant. Beck looked over. His smirk faltered. The tattoo wasn't just a design. It was structured, symmetrical, bold, military exact. A coiled dragon pierced by a lance, curling around a battered shield. And beneath it, 6 initials. S-B-T-F-I-H. His breath caught. So did Sandoval's. Because that insignia, it belonged to a unit no one talked about. A unit no longer listed in records. A unit that had disappeared off the map during the war in Turkestan nearly 20 years ago. The Iron Hawks. And the woman scrubbing rifle parts in silence? She was wearing their mark. The infirmary smelled of antiseptic and old memories. General Marsh sat on the edge of the cot, elbows on knees, a cold compress pressed gently to the back of his neck. His aide hovered nearby, still unsure whether to speak. "You fainted, sir," the medic had said. "No head trauma. Blood pressure dropped. Could be heat." But Marsh knew it wasn't heat. It was memory. Burned ink into skin, coiled dragon, cracked shield, and 6 initials. He had seen that mark before, carved into the wall of a makeshift command post halfway around the world, drawn in blood by a man who'd radioed his final coordinates with his last breath. He'd buried that insignia with 12 others. Or so he thought. "I need a secure channel," Marsh said finally, his voice quiet, clipped. The aide blinked. "Sir?" "You heard me." They rerouted him to the comms trailer. Inside, Marsh typed in an access code he hadn't used in years, a clearance level designed for after-action ghost ops. Operations so classified their failure was written out of history. The screen flickered to life. Project: Iron Hawk, Unit 12. Status: disbanded, all Kia. Operation: Black Dusk. Location: Turkestan border region. Final log entry: March 14, 2007. Marsh stared at the timestamp. March 14th. That was the day the satellite feed cut out. The day radio contact went dark. The day command told him the entire recon team had been overrun by insurgents and declared lost. No recovery, no survivors. No follow-up. He remembered arguing. Demanding permission to send a retrieval unit, he was denied. Higher brass classified the op immediately. Even his own report had been redacted before he signed it. And just like that, Iron Hawk 12 had ceased to exist. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the monitor. His breath came shallow. "Bring me the personnel files of civilian contractors currently assigned to Langford," he said into the headset. The aide paused on the other end. "Sir, that requires base commander override." "Then override it." 3 minutes later, the names scrolled across his screen. Logistics techs, janitorial, engineers, weapon maintenance. Most were standard issue. One wasn't. Name: Sarah Vayne. Role: civilian armory technician. Clearance level: minimal. Background: veteran program transfer. No prior combat role recorded. No deployment history. No deployment history? He narrowed his eyes. The photo ID attached to her file showed a woman with tied-back dark hair, olive skin, quiet eyes. The expression was bland, standard. But her posture wasn't. Even seated, she held tension like a coil. The kind that didn't come from 9-to-5 jobs or technical school. It came from being hunted, from surviving what should have killed her. And suddenly, he remembered. There was a name on the Iron Hawk list, the only non-combatant in the roster. Unit Mechanic, Vayne, S. Call sign, G9. She wasn't supposed to be in the fight. She wasn't even on the comms. But the final, frantic transmission before blackout hadn't come from the unit leader. It had been a woman's voice. Cracked, furious, steady. "They're gone, all gone, sending coordinates. If anyone's listening, burn the sky. End it." He had buried that voice under years of protocol and silence. Now it had come back walking in daylight, wiping carbon from a bolt carrier group like none of it ever happened. "General Marsh?" His aide's voice returned over the channel. "Do you need to issue a statement?" Marsh stared at the screen. His voice, when it came, was low, cold. "No, no statements." He stood, shoulders still stiff, spine straighter than it had been in years. "I'm going to see her." By the time General Marsh left the comms trailer, the rumor mill had already begun to churn. It started with a photo, grainy, hastily taken, but clear enough. The ink on her shoulder, the curve of the dragon, the initials. Someone had snapped it during morning inspection and uploaded it to the internal barracks channel. No caption, no comment, just the image. By mid-afternoon, Half the enlisted personnel had seen it. Most didn't understand what they were looking at, but a few did. Sergeant Nolan Beck wasn't one of them. At least not yet. He had seen the image, had studied it, but refused to believe what it implied. "That's not real," he muttered, standing over a cluster of lower ranks by the lockers. "Anyone can get a tattoo. That don't mean she's earned it." Private Sandoval glanced up, unsure. "But that insignia, sir, that's the same one from—" "I know what it looks like," Beck snapped. Then his voice lowered, the edge sharpened. "But I also know she walks like a civilian, talks like a ghost, and none of that adds up." So, like any good soldier when faced with something that made him uncomfortable, Beck doubled down. The next morning, he strolled into the armory with a battered old M14 in both hands and a challenge in his eyes. "All right, folks," he called out, voice bouncing off concrete. "Time for a little live demo. We've got a long weekend coming. Let's see if our contractor here really knows her stuff." Sarah Vayne didn't look up. She was calibrating an optic rail with surgical steadiness, one eye squinting through the scope, body relaxed. Beck thumped the rifle down on her bench hard enough to rattle the bolts. It was a mess. Stock cracked, gas block misaligned, sight rail crooked, trigger group sluggish from caked sand. Even the safety selector had been swapped with the wrong make. "Fix this," he said, folding his arms. "Without disassembly, just tell me what's wrong." A few soldiers drifted closer. Sarah paused. Her eyes lifted slowly to the weapon. She didn't speak. Instead, she wiped her hands on a cloth and circled the rifle once, observing like a surgeon before an incision. Then her fingers hovered over the receiver, not touching, just aligning in air. "Front gas blocks torqued 4 degrees right," she said calmly. "You tried to center it without rethreading." Barrel stressed. Beck arched a brow. "Gas. Trigger group's dragging, not just gunk the Sears worn. You used the wrong lube. Lithium grease." She tapped the scope. "Mounts aftermarket, loosened over time. You've got point of aim drift at 70 meters. Safety's reverse civilian drop-in kit. Wrong cam." Beck blinked. She finally looked at him. "This gun's a Frankenstein, and it's dying." He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "You didn't even open the damn thing." "I didn't have to." A hush rippled through the room. Private Sandoval stared, wide-eyed. "How'd she?" "Experience," someone whispered. Beck stepped back, his grip tightening. But this time, he said nothing. Vayne returned to the optic she'd been calibrating, as if nothing had happened. But the shift had already begun. The laughter that usually followed her faded. The smirks disappeared. Even the sidelong glances grew heavier, not with judgment, but with something colder. Doubt. They didn't know who she was. But for the first time, they started to wonder what she was. And that, more than anything, made them nervous. The next inspection came 2 days later. It was routine, or supposed to be a live readiness evaluation run by an outside audit team. Weapons laid out in rows, each to be checked for serviceability, structural integrity, and fault detection under pressure. No manuals, no time to second guess. Sergeant Beck saw his opportunity. He had spent the night before planting subtle faults across 3 rifles in the inspection batch. Nothing obvious. Just enough to trip someone up, especially a civilian. Mismatched buffers. Worn locking lugs. A fire selector switched to a reverse cam, just like before. The kind of sabotage that wouldn't raise suspicion, but would embarrass anyone who didn't know how to look deeper. "Wolf's on point," Beck told the others. He'd started calling her that, now a name meant to poke fun, but that strangely began to stick. Sarah didn't protest. She never did. When the inspection team arrived, she stood quietly at the far end of the room. No uniform, just boots, cargo pants, and the same olive tank top she always wore beneath a utility jacket tied around her waist. She moved through the first weapon with effortless calm. Field checked. Identified a misaligned buffer pin. Called it. Moved on. Second rifle. Pause. Her finger brushed the bolt housing. "Wrong locking lug," she said flatly. "Carrier's from another lot. It'll fail under full recoil after 100 rounds." The inspectors double-checked her claim. Confirmed. By the third weapon, even the observers had gone quiet. Then it happened. As Sarah leaned forward over the last carbine on the bench, the light caught her back. The tank top shifted slightly. Sweat darkened the fabric across her shoulder blade. And the tattoo emerged. Not a glimpse this time, not a half-hidden curve. The full image. A dragon wrapped around a fractured shield, the lance driven through both. Beneath it, 6 letters in military block font. S, B, T, F, I, H. 6 names inked in small but deliberate script beneath the shield's base. The room froze. Corporal Reyes saw it first. He stopped moving, blinked, and reached for his phone not to record, but to zoom in. He didn't say a word. He just uploaded it to the internal base channel. No caption. Within 7 minutes, the image had traveled through 3 departments. Within 10, it landed in the secured inbox of General Marsh. He was mid-briefing when it pinged. His tablet lit up with a flagged message from internal security. Unusual insignia reported on base personnel. Image attached. Marsh tapped it open. The photo wasn't high resolution, but it didn't have to be. He saw the lines, the angle, the ink pressed into skin he'd once seen streaked in blood in a makeshift field tent in Turkestan. Scar tissue surrounded it, faint, but surgical. A wound once cauterized, perhaps field-stitched, and the tattoo hadn't faded. It had been preserved, maintained, guarded. He sat down mid-sentence, the middle of a sentence lost to silence. His knuckles went white around the tablet frame. He'd only seen that shoulder once under battlefield triage, wrapped in a combat sling. But that stance, that posture, it was her. It had to be. He tapped his comms line. Divert my schedule, now. Sir? Send eyes to the Langford Armory. Quietly, I'll meet them there. In 20. He stood without another word and walked out, leaving the projector still running behind him. Back at the range, Sarah finished the last rifle. No ceremony, no commentary. But around her, the silence had changed again. Whispers buzzed in low tones. She's wearing Ironhawk ink. No way that's real. Wait, was that unit even confirmed? Beck watched from the corner. He'd seen it too. And though his jaw was clenched, something behind his eyes had started to crack. He followed the glances, the whispers, the way soldiers stepped aside when Sarah passed. Not in mockery now, but in caution. And maybe something else. Awe. The inspection had ended, but no one moved. Sarah Vayne stood by the last bench, reassembling a sidearm with the same deliberate calm she always carried. Around her, the room pulsed with a strange tension, the kind that comes not from noise, but from silence grown too heavy. Across the armory, soldiers who had laughed at her just days ago now stole glances at the ink on her shoulder. A few didn't even bother hiding their curiosity. Others stood rigid, unsure whether to speak or salute or stay very still. Then came the footsteps. Not marching, not rushed. Just a steady, measured cadence echoing from the hallway. 4 stars appeared first. General Marsh stepped into view, his face carved from memory and disbelief. He wore dress uniform, full green, polished pins, white gloves tucked into the belt crease. Not standard inspection attire. He wasn't here as a bureaucrat today. He was here for something else. The chatter in the room died. Even the overhead vents seemed to hush. Marsh crossed the threshold, each boot step like a drumbeat. He didn't look at anyone. His eyes locked onto Sarah, still hunched slightly over the workbench, unaware of the storm walking toward her. The crowd parted. Sir, the base commander called from behind him. Do you need a podium? A seat? I can. Marsh raised one hand, cutting him off with nothing more than breathless certainty. Then he walked. 10 paces, 20, past rows of uniformed soldiers, past inspectors still clutching clipboards, past every rule in the protocol manual. He stopped directly in front of her. Sarah straightened. She saw the boots first, then slowly looked up. Their eyes met. Time stilled. He hadn't seen that face in nearly 2 decades, but there it was, hardened, older, but somehow untouched. She wore no rank, no weapon, and no expectation. Only the tattoo. He stood at attention. And then, without hesitation, he saluted. Not casually, not symbolically, but with full military precision, right hand raised, eyes fixed, elbows sharp, wrists locked. The kind of salute reserved for war heroes, for legends, for ghosts. Sarah didn't move. The room watched, breath held. Unit G9, Marsh said quietly. His voice was hoarse, but unwavering. Iron Hawk, final survivor of Operation Black Dusk. A ripple passed through the armory. Several soldiers blinked. A few gasped audibly. And one Corporal Reyes slowly lowered his rifle to low ready, the gesture automatic, reverent. "She's the reason 12 men made it home," Marsh said louder now, addressing the entire room. "Because she refused to die when command forgot her." His voice broke slightly on the last words. He turned back to Sarah. "I spent 18 years wondering if you were a ghost. A name buried in a redacted file. But you're real. You were always real." Still, she didn't return the salute. Instead, she reached slowly for the edge of her tank top and tugged it higher across her shoulder, revealing the full tattoo in sharp relief, the dragon, the shield, the initials, the 6 names beneath in ink so fine they looked etched into flesh. And below them, a single line in block script, "Never forgotten." The silence shifted. This wasn't a contractor anymore. This was a soldier, a survivor, a myth who had never asked for medals, only memory. Marsh dropped his salute with ceremony, then stepped back one pace. "She didn't ask to be honored," he said. "She never will, but that doesn't change what she is." He looked around the room at every face, every unsure stare. "For the record, G9, welcome home." Sarah gave the smallest nod, just once. And that was all. Outside, the wind shifted across the tarmac. The flag rippled overhead. Inside the armory, the soldiers didn't cheer. They didn't clap. That would have felt wrong. Instead, one by one, they adjusted their posture, straightened their backs, cleared their throats, and began to see her, truly see her. Not as a technician, not as a contractor, but as something the manuals never prepared them for. A woman who had died quietly and come back carrying names no one else was willing to remember. And from that moment on, no one would speak over her again. Not at Langford. Not anywhere. Long before she was a rumor in cargo pants and silence, Sarah Vayne was just another mechanic with oil beneath her nails and fire in her eyes. She hadn't come from legacy. No family medals. No boot camp photos on the mantle. Just a childhood spent rebuilding engines and dodging the kind of expectations that said women belonged anywhere but here. At 25, she entered advanced weapons maintenance school with test scores that shattered benchmarks. She didn't just understand weapons, she felt them. Understood pressure differentials, heat distortion, recoil harmonics. She made guns not just work, she made them sing. That's when command noticed her and folded her quietly into a different path. Her assignment to Iron Hawk Unit 12 didn't come with ceremony. No parade, no orders she could show to her family. Just a flight, a contract, and a verbal directive. You are attached, you are unseen, you keep their weapons breathing. So she did. The Iron Hawks weren't official. Not really. They operated outside the wire, past political lines and beneath radar. They had no uniform patches, no official briefings, just 7 men with code names, missions, and the kind of loyalty forged only in fire. She was the only woman. They called her G9, Ghost 9. Not because she was invisible, but because she was inevitable. In 6 missions, she'd rebuilt a shattered M240 under mortar fire, restored comms with a soldering kit and a chewing gum wrapper, and rigged a trap out of a flashlight battery that neutralized an enemy patrol in 30 seconds. But Operation Black Dusk was different. They were dropped into the borderlands of Turkestan. A rogue CIA asset was leaking classified arms shipments to insurgent factions. Their job? Intercept, extract, silence, minimal engagement. They went in with sat phones, suppressed weapons, and a window of 48 hours. But somewhere, someone made a decision. Evac coordinates changed mid-op. Overlapping tribal movements closed in. The valley turned into a kill box. They were ambushed in the dark. The first explosion took out Ares and Flint. Hawkeye was shot during retreat. Vayne had just finished recalibrating their long-range optics when the call came over the radio. Fall back, we're compromised. She never got the chance. The terrain collapsed under them. Machine gun fire from the ridge. RPGs from the tree line. Their overwatch got pinned. That's when Thorne, her closest teammate, dragged her into a collapsed irrigation ditch and took a round through the collarbone meant for her. She remembered his last breath. He didn't say anything, just pressed a sidearm into her hand, nodded once, and pushed her toward the exit route as his blood soaked the soil beneath her boots. Sarah fought her way out with a pistol, a combat knife, and sheer refusal to die. She killed 11 men in under an hour close range. No backup. When the extraction team finally arrived, they found her 3 clicks from the exfil point, dragging Thorne's body behind her, boots torn, shoulder dislocated, covered in mud, ash, and the dead. She never cried. Just said, "We don't leave them." The brass didn't know what to do with her. The mission was a black mark, a disaster. They offered her a commendation. She declined. "They don't give medals to ghosts," she said. They offered her the Distinguished Service Cross. She didn't answer. Instead, she filed a resignation request typed in all caps, with no punctuation. "Let me rest before I become one of them." Within a week, the file was sealed. The unit disbanded. The mission classified. The survivors 0. She returned to the States under a false name. No reintegration briefing, no discharge ceremony, just a one-way ticket to nowhere. And 6 names tattooed into her skin, each one inked on the anniversary of their death. Ares, Flint, Hawkeye, Thorne, Ghost 3, Ghost 5. One night, she inked the final phrase beneath them herself in a quiet garage, with shaking hands and a bottle of isopropyl. Never forgotten. And for 16 years, she spoke to no one about what happened in the valley. She just kept fixing rifles. Until the day General Marsh looked into her eyes and saw the fire hadn't gone out. Back in present day, Sarah sat alone in the armory long after inspection ended. The benches were empty now. The whispering had moved elsewhere, but the memory hadn't. Her hands trembled just slightly as she reassembled the last lower receiver. Not from fear. From remembering. A faint breeze pushed in through the open doors, carrying dust and echoes. She looked down at her inked shoulder, the names, the shield, the dragon. And for the first time in years, she whispered their names out loud. One by one. Just once. And then, silence. The kind only the living can carry for the dead. The following morning, the base felt different. No orders had changed, no protocols rewritten. But there was a shift subtle, like tension leaving a wound. Troops stood a little straighter. Laughter quieted before it turned careless. And no one, not a single person, cracked a joke when Sarah Vayne walked across the courtyard carrying her kit. She didn't seek attention. She never had. But silence followed her, now not the kind born of dismissal, but of something harder to earn. Respect. At the edge of the armory, Sergeant Nolan Beck stood with his hands in his pockets, watching her work from behind a weapons rack. He hadn't spoken to her since the inspection, hadn't taunted, hadn't tested. But he'd watched. Quietly. Every day. Because the name etched on her arm, Thorne wasn't just a ghost. It was his brother. Micah Thorne, older by 6 years. Beck's protector growing up. The one who taught him how to tie a sling, how to aim with his offhand, how to never shoot unless you were willing to live with the silence afterward. They'd both joined the Navy, taken different paths. Nolan had gone standard line infantry. Micah disappeared into the black, no explanation, no forwarding address. Then one day a flag arrived, folded, sealed. No cause of death, no location, nobody. Only a line. Died in service of country. Operational details classified. For years, Beck had buried that absence in sarcasm and swagger, convinced himself that someone, somewhere, had made a mistake. Until now. Now he knew who had held Micah's body, who had carved his name into her skin. He found her behind the armory, seated on an overturned crate, wiping down a bolt carrier with quiet focus. "Vayne," he said. She didn't look up. "I didn't know," he said again softer. "Not until I saw it. The name." She paused, set the bolt aside, her hands folded calmly in her lap, but her shoulders stayed tight, unreadable. "I looked for answers for years," he continued, voice cracking. "All they gave us was a box, a flag, and nothing. Now her eyes met his. "I thought someone let him die," Beck whispered. "But it wasn't like that, was it?" She shook her head slowly. "No." They stood in silence for a moment. No drama, no apology, just grief. Then Beck took a breath. "I don't deserve to ask this, but if you're going to teach anyone around here, I want in." Sarah studied him, not as a sergeant, not as the man who once mocked her, but as the boy who still carried a brother's shadow. "You'll have to start over," she said. "I will. No ego, no shortcuts." He nodded. She reached behind her and picked up the bolt again, the one still half cleaned. She extended it toward him. "You helped build them," she said, placing it in his hands. "Before you try to lead them." He took it like it weighed 100 pounds. And in a way, it did. Sarah turned back to her bench without another word. But in that moment, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but recognition, the kind that only exists between two people who have lost the same name and are willing to carry it forward. One morning, Sarah Vayne didn't show. No note, no farewell. Just an open door, tools precisely arranged on the bench, and a small olive duffel left behind. Inside, her torque set, a worn-out sidearm, and a photo, 7 figures in dusty uniforms. One of them, a woman, turned just enough to be almost unrecognizable. Taped to the photo, a single line handwritten on ration paper: "Build what they never got to finish." From that day on, Sergeant Nolan Beck unlocked the armory at 430 sharp, laid out the rifles, waited. They called it Ghost Hour. No shouting, no salutes, no rank. Only steel, breath, and silence. And on the edge of her bench, nailed beneath the scarred wood, was a bolt she once carried, and 3 words burned into the grain. "Still watching, Ganine." Because Sarah Vayne didn't vanish. She simply stepped out of sight so others could finally stand. Some people leave behind medals. Others leave behind silence that shapes generations. Sarah Vayne's story isn't about glory, it's about quiet duty. About carrying the weight of those who didn't make it back, and honoring them not with speeches, but with precision, discipline, and care. We're reminded that leadership doesn't always wear a rank. That impact doesn't always come from orders shouted across a field, but from the way you treat a broken rifle or a broken man. Sarah didn't ask for recognition. She just made sure their names weren't forgotten. Sometimes, that's the bravest thing a person can do. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. What part of Sarah's journey stayed with you most? Have you ever met someone like her, quiet, overlooked, but unforgettable? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to remember. Some ghosts don't haunt, they teach. And some heroes never return to the spotlight because they're still standing guard from the shadows.